Have you ever wondered why it's so ridiculously hard to stick with a new habit, even when you really want to? Well, what if I told you that failure has almost nothing to do with your willpower and everything to do with your strategy? Today, we are going to dive into a powerful system that works with your brain's natural programming, not against it. It's a system that proves success isn't about more effort, it's about a much more intelligent design. You see, the most powerful way to install a new behavior isn't by fighting the old one, but by using the energy and momentum of your pre-existing routines to make the new action nearly automatic. In this explainer, we're going to show you exactly how to use this principle to make consistency feel effortless and to completely bypass the need for willpower. So how do we actually pull this off? Let's break it down.
All right, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to totally dismantle the myth of willpower. Then, we'll get into the real neurological reason new habits feel so draining, something called cognitive load. From there, we'll introduce the solution, the momentum transfer system. We'll look at the science of why it works, give you a precise guide to build your very own stack, and finally, we'll completely redefine what self-control actually means.
Okay, let's start with a foundational and honestly, a really liberating idea. If you've ever struggled to build a new habit, and I mean who hasn't, the problem isn't some personal failing. It's not that you're lazy or unmotivated or broken. The problem is, and always has been, your method. You've basically been fighting an uphill battle against your own brain without even knowing it.
And this is the core irony, right? We're all taught to just try harder, to grit our teeth and just find more willpower. But the data is crystal clear. Consistent long-term action is never about brute force. It's all about intelligent design. It's about getting the sequence right, so that the thing you want to do becomes the path of least resistance, so it happens almost by itself.
So that leads us to the big question. If willpower isn't the key, then what is? What's the secret ingredient that separates people who seem to succeed effortlessly from those of us who just constantly struggle and feel drained? Well, the answer isn't in our character. It's actually deep inside our brain's architecture.
Okay, let's get into the science of why this is such a struggle. Why does it feel so exhausting to start something new, even something really small? The reason is something called cognitive load. Every single time you try to start a new habit from scratch, you're placing this massive, unsustainable demand on the most energy-hungry part of your brain.
Does this cycle feel painfully familiar? You get this burst of inspiration for a new goal, maybe meditating for 5 minutes or writing a journal entry. For a day or two, it feels amazing. Then, day 3, you forget. Day 4, you remember, but you have to consciously decide to do it, and that little moment of friction feels like a huge battle. Pretty soon, you're exhausted by the sheer mental effort of it all, and the habit just fades away. This isn't a moral failure, it's a systems failure.
You see, the fundamental issue is that we are trying to run a new, repetitive task using the wrong part of our brain. It's like asking the CEO of your mind, the part that's responsible for complex problem-solving and huge decisions, to do the mailroom's job. It's just an incredibly inefficient and ultimately doomed use of our most valuable mental resources.
Let's break this down into the two key players. On one side, you've got your prefrontal cortex, the PFC. Think of this as your conscious mind, your CEO. It makes decisions, it solves new problems, it uses self-control. It's super powerful, but it's also incredibly energy intensive. On the other side is the basal ganglia. This is your brain's autopilot. It handles all your established routines, like brushing your teeth or driving to work, with almost zero conscious effort. When you try to start a new habit from scratch, you're relying entirely on that high-effort, easily drained PFC.
And this constant reliance on the PFC leads directly to something called ego depletion. The best way to think about it is that your willpower is like a phone battery. Every conscious decision you make, what to eat, how to respond to an email, whether or not to do that new habit, it just drains a bit of that battery. By asking the PFC to constantly remember and initiate a new behavior, you drain that battery to zero way faster. It's no wonder the habit doesn't stick.
So, if relying on that thinking part of the brain is the problem, what's the solution? Well, it's this elegant and deceptively simple system designed to completely bypass the PFC and tap directly into the automated, efficient power of the basal ganglia. This is the momentum transfer system, but you probably know it as habit stacking.
The idea is so simple, but it's also profound. Instead of trying to create a new habit from a dead standstill, you find an existing habit that your brain already runs on autopilot every single day, and you simply attach a new, very small action directly onto the end of it.
You're not starting from scratch, you're hijacking the momentum that's already there. The core scientific mechanism that makes this whole thing click is called cue inheritance. See, every habit you already have is triggered by a cue. The sight of your toothbrush cues you to brush. The sound of your alarm cues you to turn it off. With habit stacking, your new habit doesn't need to struggle to form its own cue. It literally inherits the powerful, reliable cue from a habit that's already established. This is what allows it to bypass that whole remember, decide, act process.
So how do we actually build one of these? It's a simple three-step formula. First, you need a solid foundation, your anchor habit. That's the engine that's already running. Second, you have to start incredibly small with a minimum viable action, a version of your habit that's so easy it's impossible not to do it. This is all about guaranteeing a win. And third, you create the explicit link with a simple statement.
Here's a perfect example of this formula in action. After I pour my morning coffee, that's the anchor, it's automatic, it's reliable, I will write one sentence. That's the minimum viable action. It's ridiculously easy, there's zero friction. Suddenly, the cue for writing isn't some vague willpower-draining desire to be a writer. The cue is the physical act of pouring coffee. The old habit literally pulls the new one along for the ride.
Now let's look at how this simple formula builds into something so powerful. I mean, why is this so incredibly effective from a neurological standpoint? It's because it systematically rewires your brain to put your new goal on autopilot. It helps you achieve what scientists call automaticity.
The real magic of habit stacking is this. It surgically removes the single biggest point of failure in building habits, that agonizing moment of decision. There's no longer a debate in your head. Should I do it now? I'm kind of tired. Maybe later? The anchor habit finishes and the new action just happens. It becomes part of one single fluid sequence, run by your super efficient basal ganglia.
So, to sum it up, it succeeds for three key scientific reasons. First, cognitive efficiency. It just takes way less mental energy. Second, reinforcement learning. Every time you complete that tiny action, you get a little hit of success, which chemically trains your brain to want to do it again. And third, it literally creates the path of least resistance. Doing the new thing becomes as easy and natural as water flowing downhill.
This visual shows the energy difference perfectly. Trying to start a new habit on its own, relying on your conscious brain, is like trying to run some massive piece of software on a tiny battery. It's a huge drain. But when you use a habit stack, you're plugging that new habit into the main power grid of your brain's autopilot. The energy it takes becomes incredibly, almost unnoticeably low.
And that reinforcement is where the real magic happens. This small win isn't just a feel-good idea. It's a critical neurological event. Every time you successfully complete your tiny new action, your brain releases a little bit of the neurotransmitter dopamine. This dopamine acts as a reward, sending a clear signal. Hey, that sequence was good, let's do it again. It's that chemical reward that literally cements the new habit into your brain.
Okay, we've covered the why. Now for the most important part, the how. Let's walk through the practical steps you can take right now to design your very first habit stack and make sure it succeeds from day one. We're going to revisit our 3 steps, but with a focus on getting it just right. It's not just about picking any old anchor, it's about diagnosing the best possible cue for you. It's not just about making the new habit small, it's about making sure it has almost zero friction. And finally, the master step. It's about linking that tiny action to a much bigger shift in how you see yourself.
I want you to actually pause and think about this for a second. What is something you do every single day without fail, without even thinking about it? Brushing your teeth? Making your bed? Putting on your shoes before you leave? This is the raw material, the solid ground you're going to build your new habit on.
So what makes for a perfect anchor? Well, there are a few key things to look for. It has to be something you do daily. It needs to be specific and clear, not in the morning, but right after I turn off my alarm. It should be emotionally neutral. Don't stack a new habit onto something you already hate doing. And most importantly, it has to be 100% automatic already.
Now for the second piece, the minimum viable action. This is where most people get it wrong. They make the new action too big. Look, your goal on day one is not to get a big result. Your goal is simply to get that small win and the dopamine that comes with it. So your action must be so laughably easy that you simply cannot fail. 1 push-up, read 1 paragraph, meditate for 1 single breath. You can always do more, but the victory is just in completing that bare minimum.
And this is the final and maybe the most powerful step. After you complete your tiny stack, take 1 second to actually acknowledge it. Say it out loud to yourself.
I am the type of person who is consistent. I am a writer. I am an athlete. This links the small, concrete action to a change in your identity. The action becomes evidence for a new, powerful belief about yourself, and that creates an incredible feedback loop for change.
Okay, let's zoom out for our final, big picture takeaway. This whole system isn't just some productivity hack. It's a fundamental rethinking of what self-control and discipline actually are. It's about working smarter, not harder, with your own mind.
You know, we tend to think of self-control as this act of resistance, of white-knuckling our way through temptation and forcing ourselves to do things. But that's a fragile, exhausting, losing game. True, sustainable self-control isn't about having more willpower. It's about designing a system where you need less of it. It's about being an architect of your habits, not a victim of your impulses. It's about making the right choice the easiest choice.
So remember this. Every single day, your brain runs dozens of automated routines. These are fires that are already burning bright. Stop trying to create a new spark in the cold. Instead, find an existing flame and use its effortless energy to ignite the new behavior you want to build. That, right there, is the secret to effortless, lasting change.